Hello and welcome, this is Sim Racing Corner. In today's video we're comparing the brand new Logitech G923 against the previous generation Logitech G29, which I guess is the same as the Logitech G920 if you own one of those, so yeah, this covers both of those. As you probably know, the G923 is the replacement to the G29 and G920 models, which have been around for around 5 years. And another thing you'll probably be aware of is the new Logitech G923 is still very much closely related to the wheel it is replacing. So we're going to go through the similarities and also the new upgrades to the latest model. So this should help you if you are thinking of upgrading from an older Logitech wheel, or maybe if you're looking to buy a Logitech wheel for the first time, as you may be considering paying the premium for the newer model or saving a few pounds and looking to buy one of the older ones. So I hope you find something useful in the video. If you are new to the channel and do like this sort of content, subscribe and also check out the homepage of my channel, as you will find other hardware videos covering things like this and other wheels and other bits of sim racing hardware, which I'm sure will interest you. So let's get straight into the action. Taking this quick tour around both the G29 and G923, you'd be forgiven for not being able to tell them apart. With the exception of a minor edit to the colour scheme, they are materially nearly identical. We have the same wheelbase housing, same wheel size and same layout of controls. You can tick off the similarities really easily and quickly. If you were blindfolded handling the two, most people would not be able to tell them apart. So ultimately the build quality of both is the same. Yeah, that's not a bad thing really. The G29 is very reliable and should indicate the G923 is going to be as robust and provide many years of service. The stitching on the leather wrapped wheel is slightly different, which is neither here nor there, doesn't really matter, but I will say the leather is more professionally finished on my G29. It's just a bit smoother on its application, where on the G923 the leather has a few more creases. That simply could be down to variants during manufacturing, but my G29 does look a bit tidier for this, and I can tell the difference with my hands. It just has a slightly smoother surface, which doesn't really affect comfort in any way. So, you know, it's okay, but yeah, it just looks a bit nicer on one wheel over the other. So we have the Logitech G29 pedals here and the G923 pedals for the newer wheelbase. Outwardly they look identical, just a slight difference to the print of the logo, but yeah, nothing there. Obviously exactly the same. Underneath we have the same mounting points, so that'll be the same on that one as well, and the retractable grip bar, which I will see if I can flip up. You can see that. Just little teeth in there to stick into carpets to keep the pedals in place. It's exactly the same on the older pedals. We have the clutch, and that feels the same as the newer pedals, and so does the throttle. Difference in the brake inside here, there's a different type of resistance on the older pedals, on the G29 pedals, where you have a linear spring and then a rubber piece, and so about halfway through the throw of the pedal, which is about there, you feel a hard stop, and then you need to push past it for the rest of the throw of the pedal. On the newer pedals, it no longer has the rubber piece. It has it's using just a progressive spring. Progressive spring is different to a linear spring. Linear spring is like this, where it just feels about the same. You know, whenever you compress it, it feels the same throughout the entire motion of the spring as it compresses. On a progressive spring, as the spring compresses, it feels progressively stronger, so you get greater resistance as that spring is compressed. And similar to this one, where about halfway through the pedal, it's you get this comfortable first point, and then you transition to a slightly stronger feel of the spring. So it definitely feels like two sections. So this way you're going to have the similar sort of advantage, where as you reach that point during practice, just on the track using a car, you're going to know what that means in braking force by the position of the pedal. because when you press against it, you can go, well, that's, I don't know, half or 45% braking, and then you know how much force you're going to need beyond that point to the point of locking your brake. So they both offer the same sort of deal. They both give you a feeling of resistance, which allows you to judge your braking with a bit more consistency. So yeah, slightly different, stronger, or harder, stiffer kind of transition on this one, and a slightly more sensible one, I guess, in the newer pedals. So that might be better for some people. But yeah, that's the only difference between the pedals, and there you go. Okay, so on face value, both these wheel and pedal sets are more or less identical. I've shown you that here. So this segment of the video was easy to make and short. So you could think, why bother with the upgrade? Why does the G923 matter? Well, it has received some upgrades and they are all internal. So this sets them apart from the new one to the old one. The way I would describe this though, it's refinements to get more out of the previous model design. The G923 has the same motors as the G29. There's no difference in power output. Both wheels delivering around 2.2 Newton meters of torque according to Logitech. So the upgrades we know of are the cog-based mechanism connecting the motors to the steering wheel column have been updated, been made more robust, I guess. Plus the G923 has a new controller board with more processing power. But on a teardown between both the G29 and G923 would not appear to show anything has changed much. On inspection, all you'll see is the controller board looks a bit different, and that's it. There are videos on this on YouTube. Some guys have taken their wheels apart to show you this, so I'm not going to do that myself because you do need to take the wheel off and do a lot of messing around. So yeah, other people have done the effort, so I don't need to. And from my understanding, those hardware updates I mentioned were required for the new TRUEFORCE feature. And before I talk about TRUEFORCE, that adds a tactile vibration effect layer on top of the force feedback of the G923. To start with, I just want to focus on those internal refinements, how they've improved the G923 over the G29 in regards to the core baseline force feedback. My practical test method was simply using both wheels, testing them in different games, using the same cars and tracks, and constantly swapping between those wheels to observe any differences. So this was conducted over a few different sim racing titles and using the same wheel settings for both wheels. These tests were conducted without using TRUEFORCE. The first thing that is apparent to me with the G923 is the centre resistance dead zone is gone. The centre dead zone is something that's been a characteristic, or you could say a limitation, of all previous Logitech wheels. It's something you do get used to on the G29. Most of the time it's not obvious, so not a major deal breaker, but it's nice that this has been eliminated in the newer model. When I rotate the wheel on the G29, there's an always present underlying resistance from the motors. The first thing I thought this was, it's just a force feedback effect of tyre friction. Then moving over to the G923, that friction isn't there. The wheel rotates freely, but the force feedback effects are all still present and correct, and just as strong as the G29 when I'm racing down a track. The way I would compare the G923 in this respect of the smooth rotation of the wheel is like my direct drive wheel. Okay, so of course I'm not saying it's equal to a direct drive based system in any sane way. That's not going to happen, but it's just this element. It rotates smoothly and the force feedback effects kick in appropriately. So turning the wheel isn't impeded by any unnecessary friction. You're just getting the force feedback effects which you need to get. And this tells me this is how it should be, and the G29 is somehow artificially adding some additional motor resistance. I do think the G29 is interpreting some effects differently, and that's what's happening here. The reason I came to that conclusion is because you can reduce the G29 friction by dropping the force feedback strength. Or better still, if the game has separate effects, you can target the ones that influence that resistance. However, doing so of course diminishes those effects that you are reducing. But on the G923 you don't need to make those compromises. The significance of this becomes apparent in rally games and drifting. The wheel is quicker and more natural feeling. I felt I had better car control, the handling is more agile. On track racing, the benefit isn't as crucial for quick wheel turning, but it's still tangible and the G923 remains preferable. And importantly, the force feedback effects delivered by the G923 feels more refined, more detailed, without that extra ambient motor resistance, adding that heaviness. With this benefit, the force feedback quality has been raised to a higher level over the G29. For me, this is the biggest improvement over my G29. I can't understate how much nicer that is in its significance. In sim titles in particular, I feel I have a better understanding of the car's connection to the road surface, which gives me more confidence to push the car to find the limits by how the force feedback output is reacting to my inputs. With the G29, I always felt the force feedback had a layer of vagueness that made handling some challenging cars more difficult, and then having to rely on guesswork. And this is due to this unnecessary element of added motor resistance I've been talking about. There's no difference to the power outputs from those motors, but the G923 is using those motors more effectively. I understand this now, so this is a big win for the G923 right here. Now let's talk briefly about TRUEFORCE. Well, this is a completely new feature that Logitech have been heavily promoting with the launch of the G923. TRUEFORCE is an additional vibration effect which is layered on top of the regular force feedback. The motors oscillate rapidly, producing a tactile vibration through the wheel. I have already published a dedicated video on TRUEFORCE, so I don't really want to repeat all that in this video. It is like 11 minutes long, but I would suggest you do watch that next. But I will say a couple of core details. Firstly, developers need to add specific TRUEFORCE support into their games, otherwise you'll just have the normal force feedback effects. And secondly, it can be very effective. The added tactile boosts the road surface sensation felt through the wheel. It's really good stuff. Just watch my other video as it is full of useful information. Sorry, I do feel I am underselling TRUEFORCE in this small section of the video. So do watch my dedicated TRUEFORCE presentation, as that's as much as I want to cover on TRUEFORCE in this one today. So let's swiftly move on to something else. And something I was interested in checking out was to compare the wheel rattle between the old and the new wheel. Past Logitech wheels tend to rattle when the force feedback is active, so this was worth checking out. Kartcraft is the best test for this with its lively force feedback effects. It can be quite vigorous through the wheel, and I have recorded some audio samples. Both the G29 and G923 are quite noisy in Kartcraft, but I will add this as a disclaimer: no other game produces this much rattle out of the Logitech wheels. This is an extreme test, so don't be overly put off. In other games, the rattle is less frequent and you usually can't hear the wheel over the game audio. Comparing the rattle between the wheels, the G923 is producing more noise than the G29. My conclusion being is the G923 is delivering the force feedback effects more effectively, so we're getting more rattle as a result. So if you're hoping to upgrade to the G923 for a quieter time, that's not going to be the case. The G923 has a dual clutch feature. This is new and exclusive to the model. It's not quite what you'd expect, as there are no additional clutch paddles behind the wheel. The way you operate the dual clutch is using the foot clutch in conjunction with either the LSB or RSB button on the front of the wheel that you choose during the setup process. You manually adjust the biting point of the clutch foot pedal by fully pressing the clutch pedal first, Then use the plus and minus buttons to adjust the clutch engagement level. Somewhere around the 40% mark is about right. Then for full clutch engagement, you need to hold down the thumb button on the wheel as well as the clutch foot pedal. The dual clutch is an aid for quick starts off the line. You first release the button under your thumb. This will immediately hit the biting point that you set, then a controlled release of the foot clutch pedal. It works and is effective, a good feature really. However, the G29 could have easily had the same function had Logitech made it available in the software. So yes, a bit cheeky making it exclusive to the G923, but that is the way it goes. Earlier I showed you the pedals on the table and talked about the different brake resistance methods used between the models. During testing the G923 progressive spring, I would consider it's better than the rubber bumper in the G29, as the spring does an equally good job but is less stiff. The rubber bumper in the G29 can be a problem for some people as it is hard to compress, which can be difficult physically, and requiring the pedals to be solidly secured to prevent the pedals from moving around. The progressive spring in the G923 brake pedal feels to me to have achieved the right balance for resistance and a good feel to judge the pedal position consistently, which will help you modulate accurate brake inputs. So this is a good improvement over the G29. Incidentally, there is a third-party progressive spring mod on the market for Logitech pedals, so you can retrofit that into the G29 or older pedals, which once installed should make the brake resistance operate in line with the G923 brake pedal. Both the new and older wheel use the Logitech G HUB software. There's nothing really new to show you here. Both wheels have the same control panel options, other than the addition of TRUEFORCE for the G923. And that's your lot. And that completes my comparison between the G29 and G923. I feel a lot of people looking at the new and older wheel casually will not really get that the G923 is an improvement over the older model, mainly because they look the same and technically share the same internals, except for some refinements, which are hardly massive changes. Using both wheels, I can tell the differences, and the G923, with the better delivery of force feedback, is a bigger deal than I think it's going to get due credit for. As for the TRUEFORCE Tactile, only 3 titles have TRUEFORCE support at the time of making this video, so that doesn't make it worth much, unfortunately, until more games get this support. And I hope they do, as TRUEFORCE is very nice, it's a good enhancement. The progressive brake spring, well, it's better. It's better than the rubber bumper for sure, but for a few quid you can mod the G29 brake pedal with the same thing. And finally, the dual clutch. It works, and it works quite well, to be honest, but it is a bit of a hassle to set up, to be fair, and I can see most people not using it. The Logitech G923 is of course the best Logitech force feedback wheel to date, and like previous Logitech wheels, all Logitech have done since the beginning of this line have just really made improvements over the previous model with each new iteration. This makes Logitech wheels feel familiar, going right back to the G25 where it all started with its dual motor innovation. But I can't deny the improvements are tangible, and I do prefer the G923 over the G29, but I can't argue it's not a huge leap forward, but better where it counts. I'm not going to tell you whether you should upgrade from an older Logitech wheel to the G923, as there will be some people who have and probably wished they hadn't bothered, and others that will tell you it's a lot better and worth it. I definitely see mixed responses to this question, so it's best I leave that for you to decide. G923 owners, please do drop your comments below the video. So I've given you all the knowledge I have from my experience using these two wheels over the last few weeks, and I hope that at least gives you some information that helps you. So we're done here today. Thank you very much for watching as always, and thank you for subscribing. And until next time, happy simming and bye bye.